Now that we have an understanding of this system, let's truly have a look at its origins. The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist, is the quote, right? And when we talk about systems of oppression, we often focus on the surface, right? The laws, the policies, the obvious brutality. But what if I told you that mass incarceration isn't just about locking people up? It's about conditioning them to accept control, okay? And so Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., he wrote in Where Do We Go From Here about the psychological training required to make a perfect slave. And he pulled this from the historian Kenneth Stamp's book, The Peculiar Institution, which examined actual slave owners' manuals, okay? And how they condition enslaved people into obedience. But why does this matter today? Because systems of control, just like we talked about, they don't just disappear, they evolve. Slavery evolved into the black codes. And convict leasing. Convict leasing evolved into Jim Crow, right? And segregation. Jim Crow evolved into mass incarceration in the criminal justice system that we have today. And the goal was never just to enslave bodies. It was to enslave your mind. And the perfect slave isn't just one in chains. It's one who's been conditioned to believe that their oppression is normal, resistance is futile, and the system is just too powerful to challenge, right? That sound familiar? This is exactly how mass incarceration functions today. So the perfect slave framework isn't just history, it's still being used today. And so over the next few slides, I'm going to break down the 5 steps of this framework because I found it very interesting. As someone who's a business coach, and we always breaking down our intellectual property, and the intellectual property is a framework that I've created, like I'm teaching you from. Well, there was a framework for slaves. Were they going around doing, workshops for this? This is what, it blew my mind. So, and as we go through them, I want you to ask yourself, how does this system still exist today? How has this framework been rebranded for the 21st century? And most importantly, how do we disrupt it? All right, let's go deeper. Unconditional submission, strict discipline. The slave must know that his master is to govern absolutely and he is to obey implicitly. This was the first rule of producing the perfect slave, breaking the will, stripping the autonomy, and instilling a fear of questioning authority. But here's the real question. Has anything changed? Let's look at the parallels today, because while the chains are gone, the conditioning remains. The school system, training obedience, not critical thinking. From an early age, right? Black and brown children are taught compliance over critical thinking. Zero tolerance policies disproportionately punish black students, criminalizing normal childhood behavior. Schools often reinforce the idea that challenging authority equals defiance, which equals punishment. They're not taught criminal justice literacy because knowing your rights would mean knowing how to challenge the system. Why do you think they don't teach us how the legal system actually works? Why aren't we taught how to advocate for ourselves legally from a young age? Because a well-informed, legally literate black child grows into a well-informed, legally powerful black adult. And that's a threat to the system. 2, the workplace, wage slavery and corporate control. So just like plantation labor kept slaves working under strict discipline, modern jobs control people through wages, policies, and punishments. Stay in line, don't question the system or you'll be fired. That corporate plantation thrives on black compliance and silence. And then policing in the criminal justice system. So this is the most extreme version of unconditional submission. Law enforcement. Black people are expected to obey immediately, without question, or risk death. Police are given absolute power over life and death, just like slave overseers, right? You question a cop, that's resisting. You asserting your rights, that's being uncooperative. You hesitate, oh, that's a threat. How often are we told in our communities not to challenge authority? Right? How often, how many of us were raised with the fear of what happens if we talk back to a cop? Right? This isn't just about policing, it's about conditioning. A system that survives on obedience must instill fear of resistance. The church's role in enforcing submission, let's discuss it. The weaponization of religion has long been used to justify obedience to unjust systems. Many sermons they have historically preached, and they talked about submission, endurance, and patience. but rarely righteous rebellion, right?
Yes.
Enslaved people were often told that their suffering would be rewarded in heaven, right? And today, too many churches still hesitate to call out injustice in real time. And so let's not forget, Jesus himself was a disruptor, y'all.
Yeah.
He was a disruptor. I mean, it's so clear as day, but true faith demands we challenge systems that harm the least of us. The system never needed change, it just needed control, right? All right, so now let's go to, let's hit this next one. Implant personal inferiority. One of the most insidious tactics of control was making Black people believe that they were inherently inferior. This was not just about physical bondage. This is framework number 2. This is the second part of the framework to produce a slave. Implant personal inferiority. Now, it was not just about physical bondage, it was about mental bondage. So slave owners knew that if a person believed that they were unworthy, unredeemable, and tainted, they would police themselves, right? The criminal stigma, right? So yesterday and today, enslaved people were taught that their African ancestry was a curse. So today, Black and brown people are still taught explicitly and implicitly that they are criminals by nature. So a black child is going to grow up surrounded by messages that say your communities are dangerous. Your schools are failing. Your speech is unprofessional. Your culture is threatening. What's that message? Right? You're broken. You're inferior, right? You need to be controlled, right? And the language and respectability politics. Who gets to be worthy? We see it in the way history is told. Come here, Rosa Parks. Over Claudette Colvin? Who's Claudette? Right? Because Claudette Colvin was sat on the bus and refused to give it up to a white person. She was 15. She was pregnant. You know what the Black church think about that? No, you can't lead this movement. Hello? I'm just talking about how our mindset, right? Are we trying to reframe our mindset? So we got to be honest about where it comes from and why we have these thought processes. So implanting this personal inferiority, and we also see it in how African American English is ridiculed, regarded as unprofessional and consistently code switched, even though it is a nationally recognized language. Even the way we dress, our hair, our music, everything Black is criminalized. Unless, of course, it's controlled or co-opted. Right? Right? But here's the truth, y'all. You don't have to prove your humanity to anyone. You don't have to make yourself acceptable to be worthy of justice, right? And so now let's talk about our environments. The environments reinforce this false inferiority. Look at the places many Black and brown children are forced to grow up. We have food deserts, underfunded schools, over-policed neighborhoods, generations of poverty. So if you grow up in neglect, how do you not internalize the idea that you're disposable, right? We are not inferior. The system that is mass incarceration thrives because we are conditioned to believe we deserve it, right? The truth is this system is really unworthy of us. And the church, the community, and every justice seeker in this room must dismantle these false narratives and restore the truth. Next, make them stand in fear. That's the third thing to produce a good slave. Now, fear has always been the greatest tool of oppression. Slave owners knew that to control people, you don't just need chains, you need fear, right? And that fear, you gotta fear that disobedience will bring unbearable consequences. Fear that resistance will cost you everything. Fear that the system is just too powerful to fight, right? So back then, enslaved people feared the master's power. Enslaved people were forced to witness brutal whippings, hangings, and punishments, right? And this wasn't just about punishing one person, it was about sending a message to everyone else. If you step out of line, this is gonna happen to you, right? And that fear kept people in check. The fear made rebellion feel impossible. And so now Black and brown people, we fear the system's power. Today, the police and the legal system play that same role. And so we are constantly shown videos of that police brutality, right? We are constantly seeing aggressive arrests. We're constantly seeing deadly encounters. And the message is really clear. You better comply or you're going to be next, right? Speak up and we're going to silence you. Challenge the system and we'll take everything from you. Y'all know anything about Marilyn Mosby? Y'all remember Marilyn Mosby, Baltimore? One of the first ones to ever hold police accountable for killing a black man. What just happened to her? She's a felon now. All because of a wrong checked box on a mortgage application. And that's the information she gave them, trying to prove herself. She was trying to prove her name. She was like, oh, I ain't done nothing here. Take this information. They went through with a fine red comb and said, whoop, there we go. Gotcha. Where was everybody? Why was nobody doing any proactive defense? Everybody wanted to try to get the pardon from her. Now we coming together. Can we get a pardon for Marilyn Mosby? Why we weren't fighting, bringing attention to this in the beginning? All right, I'm off topic. Let me come back. All right, so the fear of police is systematic and real. Think about it. Black parents give their children to talk about how to survive police encounters. Entire communities avoid calling the police even when they need help. People take unfair plea deals because they're terrified of the alternative. We hesitate to fight back legally because we believe we can't win. Right? This is exactly how the system wants it. If people are too afraid to resist, the system never has to change. If people are too afraid to resist, the system never has to change, right? And so the church and community's role is breaking the spirit of fear. What does the Bible tell us about fear? For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. The church must teach our people that they don't have to bow to this system. The community must stand together so no one fights alone. We must educate, organize, and disrupt so fear is no longer a weapon against us. Let us, number 4, mirror the master. Oppression is most effective when the oppressed start to police themselves. Whoa, right? Slave owners knew that true control, again, didn't come from chains alone. It came from convincing enslaved people to adopt the master's values, perspectives, and standards, right? Back then, enslaved people were taught to see the master as the standard. The master decided what was right and wrong. The master defined what was good and what was bad. The master's enterprise became the slave's purpose. Right? Right? If you wanted to survive, you had to accept the master's world as truth, right? This laid the foundation for respectability politics. We always wonder where it came from, right? Now, black and brown people are taught to see themselves as the problem. So the criminal justice system has done what the slave system did. It convinces us to accept their definition of good and bad, worthy and unworthy, criminal and innocent, right? The good black person, that's the one who plays by the rules. You know that good black person over there, we love him, right? We do all the work with him. He does work with our community all the time. Well, that bad black person, oh, that's the one who challenges authority, right? That's the one stirring up too much trouble. Nah, we stay clear of them. And then the criminal is what? It just looks like someone looks just like us, right? It don't matter what it looks like y'all, right? And this is why so many of our own people judge and distance themselves from and fail to advocate for those caught in the system. The weaponization of respectability politics. Pull your pants up. Speak properly. Don't act like a thug. We are constantly told that our own culture, speech, dress, and behaviors make us less deserving of justice. We are trained to believe that if we just act right, the system will accept us. But history tells us the truth, right? Martin Luther King Jr. wore a suit and they still beating the rest of him, right? Black men were lynched in their Sunday best. Were that black women brutalized in their maid uniforms, right? And so respectability never saved anyone from a system that was built to criminalize them, okay? So being nice, okay, so the church and community's role here is redefining the narrative. Jesus didn't conform to the Roman Empire's expectations. He disrupted them. Moses didn't teach the Israelites to impress Pharaoh. He led them on up out of bondage, right? And so our role is not to mirror the master. It's to break the master's mirror, okay? We must stop trying to prove we are worthy of fair treatment. We must stop looking down on our own people who don't fit into whitewashed standards. And we must disrupt the lie that our humanity is something we have to earn. Justice doesn't belong to the respectable few. It belongs to all of us. And in this final piece of the framework, we got to create a habit of perfect dependence, y'all. They want to make a real slave. The ultimate goal of oppression is not just control, it's dependence, right? The system doesn't just want to rule over us. It wants us to believe we cannot function without it. So back then, the slave was trained to depend on the master. Enslaved people were stripped away of their ability to be self-sufficient. Reading, that's illegal. Owning land, that's forbidden. Defending yourself, oh, that's punishable by death. The goal was to make them believe they were incapable of survival without the master. And one slaveholder said, it is necessary to impress upon Negroes their helplessness, to create in them a habit of perfect dependence upon their masters. That's what they said in their workshops where they were teaching other people how to have slaves, right? When you convince people they cannot survive without you, you don't have to force them into submission. Yes. They're going to do it willingly. Yes. Right? And so now the system conditions us to depend on it. They want us looking to them for the solutions to the problems they created. How does that make sense? I'm going to come back to that one. We wait for elected officials to fight for us. We rely on government programs that are intentionally underfunded and unreliable. We put our faith in a system that is designed to fail us again and again and again, right? And instead of building our own solutions, we keep waiting for the same system that harmed us to save us. And when the system fails, what happens? We feel powerless. We believe change is impossible. We stop fighting back. And that's the real trap. Dependence is the final chain. If they can make us believe that we need them, they never have to fear us rising up and challenging them. Breaking the habit of dependence. The church was once the center of black liberation, not the government. It was. The civil rights movement wasn't led by elected officials. It was led by faith leaders, community organizers, and everyday people who refused to wait. We cannot rely on the system to fix the problems that it created. We must fund our own legal defense initiatives. We must educate our own communities on their rights, and we must organize, disrupt, and hold power accountable.